Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to more of Dad, Thad, and my skateboard. Today we are on part 5. Here we go. Relax, Stacy, I told myself. I clenched my fists together to keep my hands from shaking as I peered around the gigantic swimming pool. Ropes strung with plastic floaters divided the large space into various lanes. Several swimmers lapped across the pool. I tried not to notice how good they were while I stood on the sideline, waiting for my turn for my individual tryout. Good luck, Stacy! I glanced over at the other side of the pool, where all 4 of my new friends, dressed in swimsuits, sat on bleachers. They waved and pumped their fists in the air. I smiled and waved back. I didn't know all of them were going to come. Now I was really nervous. Stacy Steiner? A coach called. He was a large, muscular man with dark, curly hair. He wore a red t-shirt that said Coach Russ on the back. That's me, I said, stepping forward. You're up. He pointed his clipboard to a small, slightly raised platform mounted on the pool deck to the lane closest to me. I stepped onto the starting block and took a deep breath. Remember, said Coach Russ, 1 lap for freestyle, backstroke, breaststroke, and butterfly. I nodded as I put my goggles over my eyes. On 3. 1, 2, 3. I jumped off the platform and dove into the pool. Right away, I found my pocket of air and pushed my arms through the water and kicked my legs in a straight line. Even with my adrenaline, I could tell I wasn't as fast as I used to be. But soon enough, I found the opposite wall and kicked back into the backstroke. Now I could hear my friends cheering for me. Next lap, I moved into the breaststroke. Wow, I was out of shape. This was killing me. How was I going to have energy for the butterfly, my worst stroke? But before long, there I was, exerting all the power I had to swim like a butterfly. My shoulders burned, and sometimes my chin barely got high enough for air. But then I touched the final wall, and I was finished. My shoulders shook so much that I couldn't even pull myself out of the water. But with the assistance of the coach, I managed to do so. You all right? Said the coach. I nodded as I tried to catch my breath. Well, Stacy, you had an excellent time. You do need more work on the butterfly, but who doesn't, right? I tried to laugh, but ended up coughing instead. Coach Russ held out his hand to me. Congratulations, Stacy. You made the team. I put my goggles on top of my head. You know already? The coach laughed. Oh yeah. You've got impeccable technique and would be a great asset to the team. He held his hand higher, and I realized how rude I was being. I clasped my hand in his and shook it hard. Thank you, Coach. Thank you so much. Coach Russ smiled. See you at practice tomorrow? Yes, I cried, barely keeping my voice from squealing. Coach grinned and walked away while he scribbled something on his clipboard. Excited as ever, I spun around and plowed right into Thad. I toppled to one side, but Thad kept me upright. Chrissy, Bryce, and Connor stood behind him. Did you make it in? Chrissy asked. This time, I couldn't contain my squeal at all as I jumped up and down and clapped my hands. My friends laughed and congratulated me. I spread my arms wide for a big group hug, and everyone joined in. So, you all want to go to the public pool together? Bryce asked, motioning with his head to the other section of the building, where there was another large pool. We all agreed and walked together in that direction. This pool had a few amenities, a large slide, a low diving board, monkey bars, and a basketball hoop. At the far end there was a kiddie pool, with a tiny slide and a few little fountains. Mostly I was happy to see it wasn't too crowded. Who wants to go on the slide? Said Connor. I'm first in line. No, I am, Chrissy and Bryce said together, and the 3 of them walked ahead as fast as they could, but Thad hung back with me. You seriously killed that tryout, he cried. I can't believe how fast you did your first lap. Really? I felt kind of slow. It's been a long time since I've done that. Thad laughed once. Wow, I can't wait to see what you're like when you're back in practice. I glanced up at Thad's face. He was absolutely genuine. It was so strange. He returned the curious look. What? I opened my mouth to speak, but someone else beat me to it. Someone with a pink string bikini and a perfectly pink manicured hand that crawled all over Thad's bare shoulders and chest. It was Ashley. Of course it was. Well, hi there, Thad. she said in a sultry voice. It's been a long time since I've seen you at the pool. Thad grabbed Ashley's hand and put it down at her side. Hey, Ashley, remember that personal bubble I was telling you about? Ashley let out a high-pitched laugh. Sorry, I forgot. Hey, guess what? Thad asked. Ashley bounced on her heels. What? She said, super high and super sweet. Stacy just made the swim team. He glanced over at me with a broad smile. Ashley's face fell. Oh. She glanced over at me. That would explain her suit. She batted a feminine hand at me like I was something repulsive. I gave her a huge smile. I'm glad you like it. Ashley rolled her eyes, then turned to Thad. Do you want to come hang out with us over there? She asked, pointing her head in the direction of her friends, who were sitting on the north wall of the pool with their feet dangling in the water. No thanks. Stacy and I are going to the diving board. Want to come? Ashley's face fell again. No thanks. She gave me one last glare, then turned and walked away. Thad sighed and put his arm around me as he led me a few feet away to the diving board. The best way to get rid of that girl is to ask her to do anything but sit on her duff. I laughed. Probably. I never actually asked you if you wanted to go diving, said Thad. Do you want to? Sure, but I stopped short to face him and his arm fell. His cheeks reddened. Sorry, I shouldn't have... He lifted his arm in apology. I forgot about your boyfriend. He'd probably kill me if he were here. I shrugged. He would be with Ashley if he were here. Thad furrowed his brow. Why do you say that? I shrugged again. It's hard to resist that kind of attention. How do you do it? Thad rolled his eyes. Easy. That girl is fake, lazy, totally stuck up, and kinda mean. Yeah, the first time we met she called me white trash. Thad's eyebrows shot up. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Apparently that's what you are if you skateboard. Unless you're you, of course. Thad shook his head. Honestly, I don't know why she likes me so much. I've never given her a reason to. I laughed out loud. You obviously don't look in the mirror very often. Thad fought back a smile, but failed. Look who's talking. You haven't even noticed any of the guys who are staring at you right now. He pointed his head to the side wall. What guys? I flipped my head around, and sure enough, I found a group of 3 guys in the water, hanging on the wall, who were staring at me. 2 of them looked away when they caught my eye, but the other just kept staring. Thad chuckled and ducked his head. See? And that's not even counting the heads you turned when we walked in. How do you know? I said in disbelief. Thad shrugged. I notice a lot of things. Then he stared at me, and I wondered what he noticed about me. So, I said, how about that diving? Thad grinned. Let's go. No one seemed very interested in the diving board, so Thad and I had it all to ourselves. We did nose dives, flip dives, back dives, and twisting dives. You are awesome, I said to Thad, as we both climbed out of the water yet another time. How is it that you are good at everything? Thad grinned and wiped water off his forehead. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. He walked to the front of the diving board, held his arms out to either side, and fell forward. I cringed as I waited for an epic belly flop. But at the very last second, Thad tucked into a tight ball and flipped. I laughed and shook my head. After a while, Chrissy, Bryce, and Connor came to join us. Chrissy's dives were flawless, but Bryce and Connor just did cannonballs and 360s. Stacy, can you do the splits in the air? Chrissy asked. Yeah, can you? Chrissy nodded. Let's do it. So Chrissy and I jumped into the splits and touched our toes in the air before coming back to the water. The boys followed suit. But since none of them were that flexible, it ended up being a contest of which guy had the most ridiculously looking spread eagle. I laughed so hard and so long, both my stomach and my face hurt. Finally, when the lifeguards kicked us out of the pool, the 5 of us piled into Bryce's car and continued to laugh about our day's adventures. When Bryce dropped me off at my house, to my surprise, Thad jumped out with me. Connor said something to him, which was too low for me to hear. But the others in the car must have heard, because they all laughed. Shut up, Thad said. I just need to tell her something. He shut the car door and the car sped away, leaving Thad and me standing in the dark in my driveway. What's up? I asked him. Oh, I just wanted to tell you that you don't have to feel obligated to come to my practice in the morning. I know it's super early. No way, I want to go, I promised. Actually, I can't wait. Thad's smile glistened in the darkness. Well, thanks. I'm really glad you're going to be here the whole summer. Me too. Thad inched forward like he was going to hug me, but stepped back. It's okay, Thad. Friends can give friends hugs, can't they? Thad stuffed his hands in his pockets. I don't know. I guess that depends on the hug and the friend. I have no idea what that means, I said, as I pulled him in for a hug. He hugged me back briefly, then quickly pulled away. See? A friend hug. That's okay, right? Thad shrugged. As long as you're okay with it. I'm not, someone called loudly. I looked to my left and saw my dad standing on the porch, leaning against the threshold of the open door. Dad, are you serious? How long have you been standing there? Long enough to be uncomfortable. Why don't you two come inside so I can keep an eye on you? Oh, please, Dad. You are so embarrassing. Good. That means I'm doing my job. Now get in here. I should probably go, said Thad. Nope. You too, Thad. Come on in. My dad signaled for us to follow him inside with a wave of his arm. Thad mumbled something under his breath that I didn't hear. You know he's going to hunt you down if you don't come in, right? I said in a low voice. Yep, let's go, Thad muttered. My dad flipped on the front porch light and held the door open for us. Thad and I both stepped into the living room where Grandma sat in her rocking chair, knitting as usual. She smiled up at the both of us, pretending this situation was not awkward at all. Dad shut the door and turned to face us. All right, young man, here are the Steiner rules. Dad, I cried, we're not dating. He's just a friend. You don't need to lecture him. Just friends is not what I witnessed outside, my dad said, pointing one long arm toward the door. Oh, come on. It was just a hug. Don't you hug your friends? No, actually I don't, said Dad. From the corner of my eye, I saw Grandma crack a smile. I rolled my head. Well, I do. I know that, Stacy, which is why we need to set some ground rules. No, we don't, I said firmly. Thad is not my boyfriend. I have one of those in Seattle, remember? Besides, Thad is a good guy and would never try anything stupid. Dad turned to Thad now. Is she right? Yes, sir. Thad's face was as red as I've ever seen it. Because I'm friends with your parents, Dad continued, and I'll tell them anything and everything I learn. Thad nodded. Understood. Dad peered at Thad for another long moment. Then he smiled and slapped him on the back. All right, now that that's settled, why don't you two sit down and tell me what you did tonight? Thad sat on the small sofa, but I stayed standing. No offense, Dad, but chit-chatting with you isn't what we really want to do. Dad sat backwards on the piano bench, so his line of sight was directly across from Thad. Only the small coffee table was between them. Well, if you two are going to continue seeing each other, then... Dad, how many times do I have to tell you? We're not dating. Okay, are you going to continue to hang out? Yes, I said matter-of-factly. In that case, after you hang out, I would like a full account of everything you did. Oh my gosh, no, I cried, throwing my hands in the air. Anger seeped into my gut. But before I could think of anything else to say, Thad said, well, this morning we went rock climbing with Bryce and Connor, and then we picked up Chrissy and went wakeboarding. Oh yeah, you're in the junior pro events again this year, right? Dad said, smiling at Thad and ignoring me completely. Thad smiled shyly. Yes, sir. Go on. Dad leaned forward and rested his forearms on his thighs. I heaved out a large sigh and plopped into the overstuffed chair adjacent to Grandma's. There was no stopping Dad. Thad tried to speak as casually as possible. Well, we all went home for dinner, as you know, and then we met up at the pool, where Stacy nailed her tryouts, and then... Wait a minute, Dad said, holding up his hand. Tryouts for what? The swim team. Thad glanced back and forth between my dad and me with confusion. Did she not have a chance to tell you? He shot me an apologetic look. Oh, she had the chance, right, Stace? Dad gave me a probing stare. I placed my arms on either armrest. Did I? Dad cocked his head and pretended to think hard. Well, let's see. There was that quiet drive back from the lake we spent together, then that entire hour during supper. I think you could have brought it up. I threw my hands up in the air again. What's the big deal, Dad? Do you disapprove of me joining the swim team? You know I love when you swim, but why wouldn't you tell me? Dad cocked his head, truly looking hurt now. Somehow that made me angry. He was hurt? After everything he did, he was hurt? I shrugged and spoke with defiance. Why didn't you tell me about your new job? And why didn't you care that it was so far away from me? As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Dad's countenance froze. Thad bit his lip and looked down at the ground. Even Grandma was afraid to move her knitting needles. Finally, Thad broke the silence. Sir, may I go home now? Dad nodded without looking at him. Thad stood and made his way to the door, his face smothered with sympathy, as he waved goodbye before stepping out into the night. I continued to hold my dad's stare. Now that the words were out, he could deal with them. His jaw jumped and he swallowed hard. I don't remember the last time I saw my dad get emotional. Stace, leaving you in Seattle with your mom was the hardest thing I have ever done. Oh, really? I said hotly, because you never mentioned that to me. Stacy, And remember all those times when I begged you to get a job in town? But instead you got one 1,000 miles away. I couldn't find one in town, Dad said. One of the reasons your mom was so upset with me was because I didn't have a job. I stood from my seat now. Then when you found one here, why couldn't we come with you? Because your mom didn't want to be with me anymore, Stacy. And you didn't want to be with me, I said, my angry tears finally spilling over. Now my dad stood and pointed a finger at me. That is absolutely untrue, he said in a shaky voice. Then why didn't you ever tell me that? I choked out. I burst into sobs and covered my face with my hands. I heard Grandma get up from her chair and leave the room. Silence was the only sound now. A few agonizing moments ticked by before I felt my dad's arms around me. He rested his chin on top of my head. I'm sorry, Stacy. I'm so sorry. You know I love you. You know I wanted to be close to you. I shook my head against his chest. I didn't know, Dad. You never told me. My dad squeezed me tighter and cried with me. I'm so sorry, Stacy. And we stood like that for a long, long time, both of us weeping like babies. But it was okay, because now I knew. Now I knew he cared about me. I'm not good at communicating, Stacy, Dad finally said. I never have been. Not with my own problems, anyway. But I'll work on it, okay? I sniffed. You sure communicated with Thad tonight. Dad laughed once and pulled out of our embrace. What is going on with you two? I rolled my eyes and grabbed a tissue off the nightstand. Nothing, I promise. We're just friends. That's not what he wants. I blew my nose. How do you know? Because you're a pretty girl and he's not blind. I rolled my eyes again. He knows I have a boyfriend. I've told him 1,000,000 times. Ah, the boyfriend in Seattle. Jace, right? I nodded. Dad pursed his lips. You know, Stacy... What? My dad took a deep breath. I'm going to try to communicate here, so bear with me. I cracked a smile. What is it? Let's sit down. I followed my dad to the sofa where we both sat. He looked me straight in the eye. The main reason your mom agreed to have you come stay with me for the summer was to get you away from him. What? Why? Dad shrugged. She doesn't think he's a good guy. I cocked my head. I know way worse guys than Jace. That doesn't mean he's good enough for you. I looked down at my hands and fidgeted with my tissue. Well, she never mentioned anything to me. Would you have listened? I chewed the side of my mouth. Probably not, but I might listen now. Seriously. I glanced up at him again. My new friends here have kind of, well, I realized some things. My dad raised his eyebrows. Like what? Well, they've kind of helped me get back to my fun self. Dad nodded like he approved of this. It does seem like a very fun group. The kind of fun I approve of. Exactly. So you can't possibly be worried about Thad. My dad let out a breathless laugh. I'll always be worried about you and a boy, Stace. But to be fair, he is probably the best of the best. But I thought you didn't like him. Well, I fumbled at my dad's teasing smile. My dad patted my leg. I'll let you figure that one out. Then he stood in place. Time for bed. It's late. I stood too. Can I go watch Thad's practice tomorrow morning? His wakeboarding practice? You do know they meet at 4:30, right? So, I can take a nap later. Dad smirked. All right, that sounds like fun I approve of. But if you hug him all the time, he's going to get the wrong idea. I sighed with exasperation. It was just a friend hug. Does Thad know the difference between a friend hug and a more than friend hug? I lifted one shoulder up and down. Of course. My dad shook his head. Believe me, he does not know the difference. And that concludes part 5. I hope you come back next week for part 6 of Dad, Thad, and My Skateboard. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic week. Until next time, take care.